Senator Corker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say, as I've said to you personally, we have 3 senators, President, Vice President, Secretary of State, that are exercising terrible judgment right now. And to say that you're going to do this, regardless of what we say, you're not going to ask for buy-in by the United States Senate or House of Representatives on behalf of the American people, in a conflict that you say is going to be multi-year, some people say a decade, taking us into another country with a different enemy, is exercising the worst judgment possible. And so I've said this to you as strongly as I can personally. That's in essence what you're saying to the chairman right now. Saying if Congress wants to play a constructive role, we would welcome that, to me, is a political game. And I'm disappointed that you, as Secretary of State, after being chairman of this committee, after espousing the views that you have espoused in the past, out of convenience and parsing legal words, would make the statement you just made. So let me move on and say, I'd love, you say much has been accomplished. That's a nice photograph on the front of the Wall Street Journal. Tell me what's been accomplished. What Arab Sunni nation is going to have a ground force in Syria? What Arab Sunni country is going to be flying in and bombing and doing missile raids with an Arab insignia on the side of the plane? Tell me that.
Senator, you will hear that at the appropriate time within the next days as John Allen and the team work with all of these countries for the permissions, for the basing, for all the things that will take place. I've told you they have.
Let me ask you this: Are you convinced that will happen? Are you convinced that that will happen?
Well, I've already said that.
So we will have Arab Sunni countries participating in the ground effort in Syria.
No, I didn't say the ground effort. And we're, right now, the plan is to work through and our judgment is that we can be effective working in the way that we are. Let me say a couple of things. First of all, with respect to
you can say the answer to my questions, okay? I'm not going to be filibustering.
No, I'm going to answer your question.
Okay.
I'm going to answer your question. I'm sure the chair will be, happy to sort of have the kind of dialogue I talked about earlier. It's important to talk this through.
I've got 2 minutes and 34 seconds and 4 more questions.
Well, Senator, you haven't let me answer any of them yet. So let me try to answer the question.
Well, the question is, what Arab Sunni country is going to be putting boots on the ground in Syria against this now claimed army by your deputy?
At this moment, no country has been asked to put boots on the ground, or no country is talking of it, and we don't think it's a good idea right now. So there's no discussion of that at this moment. Now, with respect to the judgment about asking Congress to do it, I'm asking, do it. Pass it. We'd love to have you do it. But we're not going to get stuck in the situation when we have the authority of not exercising our authority to do what we believe we need to do to protect the country. So we're asking you to do it. Pass it tomorrow.
You're asking us to do it, but you're not giving any details because you don't have them.
That's not true, Senator.
Well, then share them.
Senator, I'm not going to share them in public here today.
Share them in a classified setting.
I'm confident there will be so many classified briefings that you'll be tired of them. But at the moment, we're not going to lay this out until John Allen has had a chance to come to the UN on Friday, until we have had a chance to work closely with all of these countries in order to make this as effective as possible.
Do you realize how unserious the things that you have laid out and the things that were laid out yesterday sound when you're discussing training 5,000, in y'all's own words, doctors and dentists and others, in Saudi Arabia over a year? I don't know whether they're being trained for offensive or defensive. I'd like for you to clarify that, activities. My understanding is that they will be given higher tech equipment after they prove themselves on the battlefield. Do you understand how unrealistic and how that effort on the ground where they are based, where ISIL is based, doesn't match the rhetoric that the administration has laid out, and therefore you're asking us to approve something that we know the way you've laid it out makes no sense, we have a strong sense that our Army, our military leaders have urged you to put special forces on the ground, but no, we're not going to do that. So this doesn't even seem serious. It seems like a political answer to the United States as they cry out about this uncivilized activity, but it doesn't seem real to me. And if you're willing to get in a classified setting and lay out all these details and tell us which of these countries are going to be flying their flag into Syria, they're going to be putting people on the ground, because we know the Free Syrian Army cannot take on ISIL. You know that. You talk about a multi-year process. We're talking decades if that's going to be our salvation. So I'll just close with this. I'm disappointed. I was disappointed in the briefing we had last week. I do want us to deal with this in an effective way. You've not laid it out in a way that meets that test. I hope when we come back and before you've put people in harm's way unnecessarily, you have a plan that achieves the end that you just laid out. But we know right now that's not where you are. And again, I hope you'll seek it. I hope you'll say that you're not going to do it without it. And I hope you'll lay out a plan that will convince us that you're serious about doing the things you said you're going to do to the American people and to us about ISIL, because you haven't done it now. And I hope you'll lay out a way to pay for it, because we know this is going to take many, many years, and it has to do with the safety of our citizens.
Mr. Chairman, can I hope, answer a little bit here? Senator, you know, I must say to you, I really find it somewhat surprising for you to suggest that as the President of the United States talks to the nation and commits to take strikes in order to deal with ISIL, as we have come back from a week of very serious meetings with nations around the world, all of whom are committed to this, that you sit there and suggest that it's not serious. Now, with all due respect to you, Senator,
Okay.
let me just tell you something, point blank. The moderate opposition in Syria has, in fact, been fighting ISIL for the last 2 years. And since last January, the Free Syrian Army has been engaged with ISIL in Idlib, in Aleppo, in the Damascus countryside, in Deir el-Azur, and groups such as the Syria Revolutionary Front have fought off ISIL. They've expelled them from Idlib province, which borders Turkey and includes the border crossing. Over the past 2 months, moderate brigades have been deployed in northern Aleppo to prevent ISIL from capturing key border towns, including Azaz, through which a large quantity of humanitarian assistance is now being sent. But they require our support. Senator McCain knows that. He's been screaming about it for some time.
We've all been screaming
All right,
about it,
well,
and
that's-
y'all have done nothing, or at least not much to talk about.
Senator,
Yeah.
let's just understand that the fact is that what has propelled ISIS to some degree is a word called success. And as ISIS has had success, they've used social media and they've appealed to grow the numbers of greater fighters. As they have now suddenly been put on their heels, and as the United States and other countries do seriously commit to this endeavor, and believe me, what we're doing is serious, then if success begins to turn and move towards the Free Syrian Army and the moderate opposition, I believe you'll see greater numbers of recruits. That's why the President is asking for that open training under Title X in order to try to build that up as fast as possible. Our estimates are there are now currently tens of thousands still of fighting members of the opposition. And if you can get more people better trained, and by the way, every month that I have been Secretary of State, we have been adding to the effort of what we are doing with respect to the Syrian opposition. And most of that needs to be covered in a classified setting, as you know. But our assessment is that we can, and given the urgency of the situation, begin to move this program to a greater degree. So will it take a period of time? We've all said that, yes. But we're confident that we have the ability to be able to change the situation on the ground.
Senator Bob.
By the way, I do have a list here. I'm not going to go into all of it now, but there are, Albania has sent, in the last, we have had at least 18 flights that we've taken in to Erbil. We've been providing additional weapons to the Peshmerga. Other countries have been doing this. Australia's committed a number of different items to this. I'm not going to go into them publicly. Bulgaria is providing aid. Canada is sending various kinds of assistance. Croatia, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, France, Germany, Hungary, Italy, Saudi Arabia, Germany. Look, there are a lot of countries here. And by the way, they're all serious too, or they wouldn't be on this list.
Senator Boxman.
Secretary Kerry, thank you for your tireless work. I think it is shocking and a sad state of affairs that we heard just now such angry comments aimed at you, Mr. Secretary, and through you at our president, instead of at ISIS, a savage group who decapitated 2 Americans and have warned, and I quote, that their thirst for more American blood is right out there. I think it's shocking. I'm actually shaking and trembling. This is not the time to show anger at the people who are working night and day, whether you agree with them or not, to protect our people. Now, I want to talk about the AUMF. I voted against the one in 2002, which started the disastrous war in Iraq. I voted for the one in 2001, and I've reread it about 6 times. Mrs. Secretary, the lawyers I've consulted with believe that you have the authority to go after ISIL. It's very clear. You read the parts. If people listen to you, you read the parts that are correct. Now, that is not to say that I wouldn't welcome working on a new one. But I want to say right now, the way things get filibustered around this place and the way politics gets played around this place, I am proud that you say you're going to do your work to protect the American people. This is just a sad opening of a hearing. I've never seen it, and I've gone through some tough ones. Now, I want to say this. The Iraq War inflamed the long-simmering sectarian divisions in that country. I know you don't want to get into the past. It's fine. I think it's worth mentioning, because from my point of view, that's a war I voted against. I am for going after ISIL, because there's such a difference. And there are 2 strains of thought as people speak out against the policy of the administration. One is, they say, you're not doing enough, go back with those ground troops, more war, more boots on the ground, American boots, they're the only boots that work. You've proven, just with a few examples, that that's just not true. And I certainly reject that. And the other, the second school of thought, represented in some of the folks out there who I like and talk to all the time, they think we shouldn't take the fight to ISIL. Forget it. It's too complicated. It's fraught with uncertainty. We should sit on the sidelines. I oppose that. You cannot sit on the sidelines. At least I cannot. When you have a group that's selling 14-year-olds, as my former colleague said, 14-year-olds as slaves, giving them as gifts to their fighters, murdering ethnic and religious minorities, including Christians and Yazidis and Shiite Turkmen, and again warning that their knife will continue to strike the necks of Americans.
John.
They have a very simple goal. They say, if you don't take our twisted version of Islam, you either flee, you convert, or you die. So, no, I'm not going to sit idly by. Mr. Secretary, I have a question for you. I was being interviewed, and I was expressing these views that I just expressed, that there are certain areas where it's gray, and there's certain areas where it's clear. To me, I mean, everyone takes their own lens to the question. And I was asked this question: How can we make sure that the Syrian moderates we help are the right ones? And this particular reporter said, well, we've heard reports that the Syrian moderates signed a non-aggression pact with ISIL. My answer to that was, there are all kinds of Syrian moderate groups, and we're certainly not working with those who don't see it our way. Could you expand on that answer? Or
I'd be delighted to. Let me just say to you, that's disinformation fundamentally put out by ISIL. The moderate opposition recently restated its commitment as a national movement to fighting extremism generally and including ISIL, and a recent statement that they'd reached a truce is simply baseless, not accurate, and they have not, and they will not.
Thank you. And then just, I mean, I don't have enough time to ask everything, so I'll ask one last question. What roles do Iran and Russia play in this conflict? And how do the interests of these two countries factor into the president's counter-ISIL strategy? I know it's very delicate, but how would you respond to that?
Well, Russia obviously is a principal line of support to Assad, Assad, as we all know, has neither proven the willingness nor the capacity to go after ISIL. And Russia was at the meeting in Paris. China was at the meeting in Paris. Both spoke out powerfully about the need to stand up to ISIL. And Iran, as you know, there was a subject of whether or not they might have been invited. There were certain problems in trying to make that happen because of country objections with respect to their presence, et cetera. And it didn't happen. But Iran, obviously, is deeply opposed to ISIL. Now, we're not coordinating militarily or doing anything, but we have had brief conversations on the side of our negotiations that are taking place, the P5+1 Iran nuclear negotiations, and we're prepared to see whether or not Iran can contribute in a constructive way. But that would require also changing what's happening in Syria, where their IRGC is on the ground and supporting Assad and been engaged in activities, Hezbollah on their behalf, whom they support. So there are a lot of areas of twisted conflict in the relationships here. And we are looking, it would be negligent not to be open to listening to some change in the dynamic or some possibility of constructive activity, but we're not relying on it, waiting for it, organizing around it, or in fact coordinating with it at this point in time.
Thank you.
Before I turn to Mr. Risch, Senator Risch, let me just say to the Secretary on this subject, I heard what you said, but to me, Iran is a regional instigator. It is a patron of the murderous Assad regime. It's a sponsor of sectarian divisions inside of Iraq. It uses Iraq's airspace to send troops and men into Syria. And some of us are really concerned that, first of all, their end purposes are not our end purposes. And secondly, that some of us are concerned that negotiations with Iran, are affected by, if to the extent that they express any desire to be helpful, they want to do it at the cost of concessions at the negotiating table. I know you're shaking your head. And
not going to happen.
I wouldn't expect anything else, which I have to be honest with you, when we hear all these back-channel efforts and then they get outed by the Ayatollah, it creates uncertainty in that process. So I don't want to take more time for my colleagues, but Senator Risch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John, I share some of the anger of Senator Boxer when it comes to what's been going on with beheading of Americans. I mean, this is a tough time for America, for Americans to be watching their fellow citizens being beheaded by these savage people, and something's got to be done about it. And I fully empathize with the problem you've got. Where it's happening is such a complex situation with complex cultures and what have you, and you've got to do something about it. I want to throw in with the chairman. He mentioned 3 points, I think, in his opening that he was hoping he'd hear, and I haven't heard yet. And that is, he talked about hearing the plan that you have. and he wanted to hear what success looks like, and he wanted to hear some metrics as to how we measure progress. And John, I'm just not there yet. I'm not convinced. And this is particularly true where I think everyone's in agreement. The President's in agreement, Congress is in agreement, the American people are in agreement. Nobody wants American boots on the ground. I mean, that just is not going to happen. There's nobody going to go there with that. In fact, had the President come here and said that, look, I want authorization for airstrikes, you and I both know how effective the drone program has been and how good it has been as far as accomplishing the goals that we have in Yemen, in Pakistan, and in other places. If he'd have come here for that, you'd have had no problem with me. As far as the boots on the ground, who do you get to do it? Well, we know the Iraqis can't do it. They dropped their guns and uniforms and went home at the slightest bit of threat. With all due respect, I know everybody talks about the moderates, opposition, and the rebels. We've been through this for over a year, and I'm just not convinced that there is such a group there. So you said, let's talk about this, and let's see if we can't come up with some way to do this. You know, the best group around to be able to do this for boots on the ground are the Kurds. They've been incredibly successful. They've been a reliable. They've been reliable to us. They're great fighters. I mean, if anybody's going to succeed on the ground in Iraq, or for that matter in Syria, it's going to be the Kurds. Have you guys given thought to partnering up with them? What am I missing here?
Well, you're not, Senator. They've been extraordinary, and that was our first line of effort, obviously. That's why we put the Joint Operations Center in Erbil right away. And that's why we elicited immediate support. I mean, we really had to hold that line. That was critical, and that's why the President was prepared to use some strikes, actually, to help guarantee that that happened. And there's a huge flow of weaponry. As I said, 18 flights that I know of from us have gone in now to Erbil. There are flights coming from other countries, too. Italians, others, lots of countries have been supporting the Kurds in this effort. And, you know, I think this is the work that John Allen needs a chance to sort of develop a little bit, see how it's going to go. The bottom line is the commitment to destroy ISIL. And that means what I described earlier today. And for the moment, growing the moderate opposition is one way of coming at it, and we'll see, you know, what else may be possible as we go forward.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's encouraging for me to hear that you have engaged the Kurds. I think that.
Oh, very, very much so. And
all right, let me, with the little time I have left, I just want to make absolutely certain of your testimony. You originally said when you're meeting with these other countries, they've said, and I'm quoting you, "What can we do to help?" But you've also said that nobody has agreed to put boots on the ground, and then I think you said that you haven't asked them to put boots on the ground. So let me be very clear about airstrikes. Has anybody committed that they would fly their flag in and do airstrikes into Syria?
Yes.
And they are committed to do that?
Yes.
Okay. That's good. In a classified setting, we'll be able to get who those people are.
Yes.
That is much more encouraging. Thank you, and with that, my time is up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cardin.
Well, Secretary Kerry, first of all, thank you for your incredible service, and what you have stated expresses my view on the need for international action against a barbaric terrorist organization, ISIL. It requires an international response. I think President Obama has been effective, particularly in the actions in Iraq. The military strikes have been very effective in pulling back ISIL's advancements, and I think the President deserves credit for doing that, and certainly has my support. You've been effective in bringing about an international coalition, and that's extremely important. Whenever we are involved in missions like this, it must include international presence. And you have been very clear that we will not have combat ground troops as part of this campaign, and I support each of those statements. So I want to get back to the point that the chairman mentioned, and I guess just about every one of us have mentioned, in regards to the authorization of force. because I'm not clear what we will do in Syria, and I'm not comfortable yet as to what we will do in Syria, and I'm looking forward to more information being made available to us. But my concern, and I'd really like to get your thoughts on this, is that the authorizations that were passed in 2001 and 2002 were clearly aimed at a different circumstance. And if your lawyer's interpretations are correct, they're open-ended indefinitely, well beyond the Obama administration, and could be used to, for long-term commitments, including ground force commitments in the future. And that certainly was not congressional intent. I did not support the 2002 resolution. As the chairman said, it was based upon misinformation. And 2001 was clearly aimed at the circumstances in Afghanistan. It was not intended to deal with the current circumstances in Syria. I would hope we would all agree to that. So I think it's absolutely essential that we come together and revisit the authorization issues. More than that you would welcome congressional involvement, I think it's imperative that we attempt to clarify the authorizations on the use of force to meet the current needs. In Syria, I don't think that's going to be difficult. I think you've been invited in by another country. I think we can... Iraq, excuse me, Iraq. I don't think it's difficult in Iraq, thank you, Senator Boxer. We've been invited in by the host country. It's clear we're not going to put increased combat, we're not going to put combat troops on the ground there. Syria is going to be more difficult because there are many of us who are not prepared to authorize the use of force in Syria with the information we currently have. But that's something I think we have to work with. You have Article II power. The President has Article II power. So he always has the right for a short period of time to defend the interests of this nation as he sees fit, and that's his responsibilities as Commander-in-Chief. So I don't think there's any immediate urgency for the congressional action. But I just think it's vital for the appropriate role and for moving forward beyond just the Obama administration, because as you pointed out, these circumstances are not going to end in the next 2 years. And I just welcome your thoughts as to how you think we should proceed in trying to deal with the type of authorization that can pass Congress, give you the comfort levels that you need, but protect us against any lengthy, particularly combat involvements in these countries in the future that should be done by their own military.
Well, Senator, thank you very much. Thank you for your comments. But look, I wouldn't sit here comfortably and suggest to you, nor would President Obama by that token, I know, suggest to you that this ought to go on indefinitely and that there shouldn't be an effort with Congress to define this. Of course there should be. I think the American people want it, deserve it, and it's an appropriate role for both branches to play, to work together, to articulate that going forward. The President has made it crystal clear he's ready to do that. We know the Chairman has announced that he's going to begin work to define that. We look forward to working with you to define it. That's how we go about it, is to work effectively to do it. Now, in the immediate moment, we have a Prime Minister. Do you have the comments of Prime Minister Abadi from the press conference the other day? Get those out for me, please. In my meeting with Prime Minister Abadi, at the end, we met with the press, and I'll just read you what Prime Minister Abadi said as an opening comment, not even prompted, or a part of a question. He said, ISIL is a terrorist nation. It is mobilizing its international network to recruit people from all over the world. They have funds from all across the region. We are fighting these people. These people are, and there was something inaudible about our communities attacking or something, minorities, women, children. They already, then it was inaudible about women, killing or raping. They are a challenge to the whole region, to the international community. They are coming to Iraq from across the border, from neighboring Syria. Of course, our role is to defend our country, but the international community is responsible to protect Iraq and protect Iraqis in the whole region. What's happening in Syria is coming across to Iraq. We cannot cross that border. That's on an international basis, but he says it's an international border. But there is a role for the international community, for the United Nations to do that role, and the United States to act immediately to stop the spread of this cancer. This cancer is spreading in the whole region, and we have the resolution to fight the cancer in Iraq. We Iraqis will have both an inclusive government now, and we can do this job properly. Everybody as a whole. And he goes on to talk about how they will do it. But he specifically asks for the United States of America to help in this role. Now, our lawyers also are clear that Iraq has a right of self-defense. And Iraq is exercising its right of self-defense and asking the United States to help it. And we already have a military agreement with them with respect to that. And so Iraq is asking us to help them, and as a matter of right, if they're being attacked from outside their country, you have a right of hot pursuit, you have a right to be able to attack those people who are attacking you as a matter of self-defense. So we believe there is a full justification here, and obviously that will be laid out further. But is it better to have a greater statement of that? Is it better to have the Congress of the United States defining this going forward? We agree. But we need to move, and to move rapidly because of the urgency of this danger.
Senator Rubio.
Thank you. Secretary Kerry, I was struck by the language in your opening statement. ISIL must be defeated, period, end of story, and collectively we are all going to be measured by how we carry out this mission. From a military perspective, the plan of carrying out this mission involves a combination of Iraqi forces in Iraq, greater, from the military perspective, more capacity, of course the Kurds, moderate rebels in Syria, and American air power, no combat boots on the ground on the part of the United States. But over the last few days since the President's made that announcement, there's been real doubts expressed by military experts over whether that strategy will achieve what you've defined as our goal. The Washington Post reported that the top U.S. commander in the Middle East advised the President that we needed a modest contingent of American troops, especially Special Operation Forces, to advise and assist Iraqi Army units. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs yesterday in the Armed Services Committee said that if local forces don't work, he would recommend U.S. ground troops potentially to the President. So my question is, if it becomes clear that the only way to achieve the defeat of ISIL, period, end of story, is for the engagement of American ground troops, will that be something the President will consider at that time?
The President will not put American ground troops into Iraq. And the President made it clear again today in a statement that he made at CENTCOM that America can make a decisive, I'm quoting the President, we can make a decisive difference, but I want to be clear, the troops that have been deployed to Iraq do not and will not have a combat mission. We believe, and we're not going to deal with hypotheticals about what happens if and this, we believe there are any number of options as to how one can guarantee the effect on ISIL long before you were to get to the hypothetical conversation about Americans. So I understand the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, whose job it is to look at it from his perspective in terms of his military and his judgment. But the President's made a judgment as Commander-in-Chief that that's not in the cards, and that's where we are.
So even if the only way, if the military experts...
I'm not going to deal with a hypothetical.
Well, it's not a hypothetical. It's actually,
way.
it appears to be, quite frankly, we're relying on a military strategy built on rebels who at this point are under assault, not just by ISIL, but by the Assad regime, by local Iraqi forces, of which some testimony say up to half are incapable of fighting at this stage, and Kurds that have been great fighters but are only willing to protect their territory. This is a very clearly stated goal, and the reason why it's not a hypothetical is there may come a point where what you're saying is that if the only thing that can solve this problem is U.S. combat forces, we're not going to do that, and ISIL gets to stay.
But I think we're so far away from that quote being the only way and hypothetical. I mean, honestly.
Then let me ask you this.
No, let me just finish that quote. I mean, you know, I'm not going to get into hypotheticals, but you're presuming that Iran and Syria don't have any capacity to take on ISIL. Well, I mean, who knows? I'm not going to get. I don't know what's going to happen here. Let's start down this road and see.
Well, let me ask you about that then. So what you're saying now is that there is the opportunity, the potential that the U.S. would be coordinating with Iran?
No, I never said anything about coordinating. If we're failing, and failing miserably, who knows what choice they might make. You prepositioned this on the notion we're failing. I don't believe we're going to fail.
I didn't preposition.
And we're
on
not
the-
setting
I'm-
out.
I'm prepositioning on the
Yeah,
statement.
you
of
did. You said if
military
we
ex-
fail,
Well,
we can't
again,
do
I'll
it.
go back to the report. I mean, the number of people, including former Defense Secretary Gates, has expressed his belief that it's not possible. A number of highly qualified military experts have said they do not believe
But
that
there-
the goal you have stated in your opening statement is
There are lots of
achievable without a U.S.
possibilities.
presence.
There are lots of possibilities
All right.
between here and there. The president has said he is not going to put American.
Well, you mentioned Iran, and Iran yesterday said that, not that it was on the sidelines of these negotiations, they claimed that the U.S. ambassador in Iraq reached out to the Iranian ambassador in Iraq and asked to discuss some sort of level of coordination. And the Iranians already gave us our answer. You said you were open to some sort of dialogue with them, if it had any sort of promise to be productive. He's already answered the question. He says he sees no point in coordinating with a country whose hands are dirty. That's what he said about us. He says, quite frankly, that he said this, not me, please, but he says that you're lying, that we did not exclude them from the talks to join the coalition. They excluded themselves, that they refused to participate. And he went on to say that in Iraq, the U.S. goal is to turn it into a playground where we can enter freely and bomb at will. I would just say that any hopes of coordinating with Iran, who I consider to be just as evil as ISIS, is something that I would discourage for a number of different reasons. But I want to ask you this one more question, and it has to do with the rebels in Syria. Later today, Ambassador Ford is going to testify that the biggest enemy that moderate opposition faces is the Assad regime. In fact, there are credible reports today that the Assad regime has stepped up its targeting of moderate rebel or non-ISIS rebel forces in the hopes of wiping them out so that the Assad regime, will be the only alternative left in Syria. If we are interested in supporting the moderate rebels, will it not require us to protect them from Syrians as well, from the Assad regime as well, if we hope that they can develop into a credible fighting force?
ISIL first. That's our policy.
Well, but Ambassador Ford is going to testify later today that the biggest enemy they face is the Assad regime bombing them. And there are reports today, credible reports, that Assad has stepped up his campaign attacking these moderate rebels. They may not be there for us to arm.
That's not our judgment, but we obviously recognize that there are serious challenges with the Assad regime, and our policy has not changed of opposing the Assad regime and helping the moderate opposition. And in classified forum, I think we have a better opportunity to discuss what we're doing additionally in order to do that.
Senator Sheen.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here and for all of your tireless efforts to address the ISIS threat. That is a threat that I believe was really brought home to the American people by the barbarous and heinous murders of James Foley and Stephen Sotloff. And as you may know, Jim Foley grew up in New Hampshire and Stephen Sotloff went to prep school there. And so they both have ties to my state, and I think people in New Hampshire and across the country really felt very personally those murders. I appreciate, and I said this yesterday at the Armed Services hearing with General Dempsey and Secretary Hagel, that I appreciate the efforts of our men and women in the military to make a rescue attempt to free those James Foley and Stephen Sotloff and the other Americans being held hostage. But I have been very troubled by the comments from the Foley family that have been reported about their concern that they did not, were not communicated with and did not have support from our government as they were trying to deal with the hostage situation for their son. And I wonder if you could, well, let me rephrase this. I hope that post the murders that this administration and future administrations will seriously reassess what can better be done to support families who are dealing with this kind of a crisis. Some of the reports have pointed out that there are other countries who have different ways of dealing with the families, and I certainly hope that you will help in this effort as we look at how we can better support those families.
Well, Senator Shaheen, excuse me, Senator Shaheen, first of all, let me begin by saying that I know how personally, deeply involved you were in Jim's case and in working with us to try to keep the focus on it. I know how close you were to the family, and I know how much effort went into the prior effort when Jim was in Libya. I worked on that personally and on this subsequent effort. We raised it with country after country to try to get foreign minister or some contact in the country. Is there a way to get proof of life? Is there a way to find out where is, what are they, is there a way to negotiate the release? Most recently, even in the last 2 months before he was barbarously killed, I was talking with people in one of the Middle Eastern countries who traveled to Syria on our behalf in order to try to find out whether there was a way to secure the release of these hostages. And I know that you also made an incredible effort to reach out to country after country. I know the Czech Republic, others, you were very much active in this and engaged in it. And when we got him out of Libya, which we worked hard to do, I was in touch with people on Global Post who I know very closely. I mean, they're friends of mine who are part of that effort, so they were always in touch with me and talking personally about it. Now, I've read these accounts of things that have happened or their judgment. I talked to Diane and John Foley after Jim was killed. I mean, I think everybody here would just, shudder at what they have to go through. So this is something we feel very deeply, so much so that I remember the hours we sat in the Situation Room in the White House working with our brilliant military who did a remarkable job of designing a rescue mission, and the President made the difficult decision, because it's always difficult. You're putting American service people at risk going into another country. They have air defense. You don't know what's going to happen. And you're going in where there's ISIL. And I sat in the White House in the Situation Room and watched that entire mission unfold and was amazed by the capacity of our military people to do what they did. A high-risk mission performed flawlessly. And the intelligence was correct to every degree, that they went in the right place, they did things correctly. It just was empty. They'd moved them. And we don't know exactly how soon or when ahead of time. And you have no idea how just the feeling in that room when the message came from our people on the ground saying nobody's there. So we felt that and feel it to this day. But, if they feel unhappy, somehow that it wasn't worked properly, whatever agency it was, we have to make sure in the future that we're going to make sure that that's just not a feeling. I mean, first of all, we hope no other family has to suffer that, go through it. But to whatever degree that's a possibility or an eventuality, we got to make sure that people feel better about the process. And I can assure you, the President on down, everybody feels that sensitivity.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And for the hostages who are still being held, I hope there will be an effort to look at how those families are being supported. Mr. Chairman, I know that my time is up, but I just wanted to make one more comment, because I know, Mr. Secretary, that you have repeated the President's argument that this military campaign doesn't require a separate authorization for the use of military force. But I certainly believe that if we're going to commit to a long-term effort to address ISIS, that having specific congressional action that is bipartisan to support that effort is very important. And I believe we should undertake that, and I know the chairman has said that he intends to do that regardless of whether the White House and the administration comes to Congress or not. So I certainly support that, and I hope that the administration will work with us as we do that.
Yep. Well, we are coming to Congress. We're here, and we welcome it, and we look forward to working with you on it.
Thank you. And I appreciate Senator Shaheen has expressed to me on more than one occasion already her desire to work with the chair and others on behalf of such an AUMF, and we look forward to working with you and other colleagues as well. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, obviously these are pretty complex issues. I do not envy you and the President your task at all. You're in my prayers, the President's in my prayers. Actually, I ask all Americans to include you in your prayers, because if you succeed, we all want you to succeed. That means America and Americans remain safe. I've been listening to you and the President very carefully. I'm sure the world has been as well. And words have real meaning. So I appreciate the fact that you've testified today here that ISIL must be defeated, period, end of story. You know, the President, in his speech to the nation, said that the goal here is to degrade and ultimately destroy ISIS. But here's my concern. Here's my problem. In the final two paragraphs of his speech to the nation, President Obama said, our own safety, our own security depends on our willingness to do what it takes to defend this nation. But, Mr. Secretary, by taking options off the table, isn't President Obama really saying to do what it takes up to a point? And as Secretary of State, as you're dealing with potential coalition partners who are also listening, if we stay at a goal and the world doesn't believe we're 100% committed to it, is that going to be very difficult for you to get the kind of commitment out of our potential partners to do what they need to do to actually achieve that ultimate goal?
That's a very fair and a really good question. And by the way, thank you for your comments and your prayers. The answer is that the President and the military folks currently believe we have the capacity, we have the plan, we have the coalition to be able to do the job. Now, you know, there are a lot of countries in the region who have capacity going forward who, in our judgment, if somebody's necessary to be on the ground, ought to be lining up first. So there are a lot of options here before we start getting to the talk the President's taken off the table.
Okay, we've covered that ground. Let me ask you, in your discussions with, for example, Saudi Arabia, do the potential Arab states, do they understand how fragile American public opinion will be toward this effort, toward this destruction, if they don't fully commit? And when I think fully commit, I'm thinking back to the first Gulf War, when America only had to pay for about 15% of that, and almost 50% of that war effort was paid for by Gulf states. The other portion was paid by Germany and Japan. I mean, do they understand why it's so important for them to step up to the plate and visibly support this effort?
Yes. And in fact, King Abdullah said to me personally, we will do whatever is needed to be done. We are committed fully to this effort, and they have been. Now, there are bigger complications than just sitting here and talking about having the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia put its troops on the ground in Syria, next door to Iran, with all of the extraordinary complications of the region regarding Shia, Sunni, and other geostrategic challenges. So we need to be working at this very carefully with all of the nations that are part of the coalition, recognizing we have to win. And we're just getting started at that. So I can tell you we're not going into this in order to fail, and nor are any of these other people who are signing up. So
Well, let me offer, I'll be up in New York next week representing the United States at the UN with Senator Cardin. I'd like to offer, you know, whatever I can do to help convince those Arab states that they do need to be fully committed to this battle. Let me ask you another question. An analogy I've been using, and here's another concern of mine. If this is going to literally take years, the analogy I've been using is if you identify a hornet's nest in your backyard, You realize, boy, we got to take care of that. But if what we're really doing is just going in the backyard and poking that hornet's nest with a stick, isn't that a concern right now if we aren't fully committed to wipe out ISIS quickly? You mentioned Brett McGurk provided powerful testimony to this committee back in the end of July about the threat that ISIS really does represent, being able to funnel 30 to 50 suicide bombers into Iraq per month. Now we've seen those suicide bombers come from Australia and Germany and America with passports. And Mr. McGurk's comment was they could easily funnel those suicide bombers into the West and into America. So that's my concern about allowing this, not being fully committed, not getting in there, not cleaning out that hornet's nest as quickly as possible. Don't we just increase and increase the time where we're really under threat and danger?
Well, we hope not, Senator. Obviously, that's not our strategy. I mean, look, ISIL, why do we have to focus first on ISIL and focus on it in the way that we are? Because they're seizing and holding thousands of square miles of territory. Because they are claiming to be a state. They're not a state in so many ways, and we can go through that. They are confronting and defeating, thus far, conventional army with conventional tactics. They are avowed genocidists who have already practiced genocidal activities at a certain level. Yazidis, Shia, people that they've decided to go after along the way, Christians. And they have a very large amount of money, unlike lots of other terrorist organizations, because they cleaned out the banks and they have sold oil and done other things in the process. And so even al-Qaeda, bold as they were and what they decided to do, didn't exhibit these characteristics and didn't have those capacities. And that's why we believe, and we think most of the region has come to understand this, including the moderate opposition, who are already fighting ISIL. So we believe we have the makings of an ability to be able to have a very, very significant impact. And already, by the way, France and the United Kingdom are flying with us over Iraq, and several other countries are now starting to be willing to join that. So we think we have the building of an ability to be able to turn that around. I guarantee you the President's goal is to defeat them, and as you and we see this unfold and make judgments about how well we're doing, we can, have further discussions about what else it may or may not take to get the job done. But at the moment, these are the judgments that are being made.
Well, thank you. You've made a strong case for defeating ISIS and being fully committed to doing it. The sooner the better. Thank you.
Senator Durbin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary, as I look at this challenge from ISIL, I think there are two distinctly different parts to it relating to Iraq and Syria. I don't believe there's any future for Iraq unless Iraq is committed to that future. The new leadership there has given us some hope, but ultimately we have to trust that we can either train or provide the skills and support necessary to the Iraq Army, that in fact they will not be so overrun with corruption that they cannot be an effective fighting force. That is it's a big task, but I think it is, at least we're hopeful. It's within our grasp. I look at Syria and see a totally different circumstance there. Syria is a dog's breakfast of violence and terrorism and deceit and carnage that has gone on for 3 years. Here we are talking about arming or equipping and training a moderate force within Syria. Now, I've read the language that is being considered in the House, unless it's been changed in the last day or so. Never mentions the word Assad once when it talks about what we're trying to achieve in Syria. It comes down to this basic question. It looks to me that there are at least 3 identifiable forces in Syria: Assad, ISIL, and what we hope are moderate opposition forces we can work with. But I'm also told, and have been told, there are up to 1,500 different militia in that country. Some are neighborhood militia. How can we chart a course here that defeats ISIL in Syria and does not, in the end, strengthen Assad's hand? How can we find the so-called moderate opposition in Syria and believe that something will emerge there that results in Syrians deciding their own fate and future is their responsibility?
A very good question. And the calculation is that even with the difficulties that they faced over the last year and a half, particularly, I remember when I first came in February of last year, the opposition in Syria was actually in a slightly better position with respect to Assad and the other groups, and there weren't as many of the other groups at that moment in time. And then, regrettably, they started to squabble politically, as well as which military group would do what. They lost some momentum with that, number one. Number two, they didn't get enough supplies at that point in time. Number three, the country began to be flooded with these external fighters from outside, and some countries in the region who wanted to get rid of Assad started funding people who seemed to be tougher fighters who morphed into either al-Nusra, Ahrar al-Sham, or ISIL. And then they began to fight, and so the concentration on Assad was just dissipated. And during that time, some of the support that was coming from countries in the region was frankly also very badly directed and managed. All of that has changed now. We have upped our support and our engagement, our training, things that we're doing. Other countries have upped it. They've worked out many of the leadership issues that existed. There seems to be, and even despite these difficulties, they've been able to fight ISIL and move ISIL out of certain areas and keep fighting Assad. You've seen this continuing. Our belief, therefore, is that as the principal antagonist to their presidency, more so than Assad in some ways, starts to take hits and they gain greater strength, greater training, greater equipment, greater capacity, the success will bring to them, we think, larger structure as well as a greater know-how and ability. And if ISIL is defeated, they're going to be taking that experience in the same direction that they originally set out to, which is to deal with Assad.
I'd like to ask one last question. We know, and you've said it in this testimony, that Russia is supplying Assad.
Thank you.
We have known in the past when there have been sources of money, equipment, and other support for our enemies. As we look at ISIL today, you told us in testimony that Russia, you mentioned Russia, and China, and we know by its nature Iran is a Shia nation, oppose ISIL. Who are the countries, which countries, are aiding and abetting the ISIL cause, either by providing resources, equipment, and arms to them, or allowing their trade to create resources and wealth so that they can continue the fight?
We don't believe at this point that it is state-supported. What we believe is that because of their success in particularly getting the bank in Mosul and other success along the way, as well as in selling oil.
Let me stop you there. Who are they selling it to? Which countries are transiting?
I was just about to get to you. We have raised with a number of countries in the region the question of how they could possibly be getting oil out of the country. It's being smuggled out. And that's part of the approach here is to
Through
deal...
which countries do you believe it's being smuggled out?
Well, it's being smuggled out from the border countries of Syria, obviously, which means either through Turkey or through Lebanon or south.
And are they joining us in the effort to stop the smuggling?
They are, but obviously Turkey has difficulties right now, has 49 hostages that are being held, and they've talked about that publicly, and Turkey is, we've had some conversations with them, and those conversations will continue.
The sooner we can cut them off from their sources of funds and
It's exactly what the object. Now, a lot of the money,
Arms.
there's other money that comes through social media, internet appeals, through individual fundraising. We've been able to trace a one-time lump sum, $140,000, that came through one country from an individual in the region. And, excuse me, that's why we're going to have this immediate focus on the movement of money and begin to really get tough in shutting down that flow of funds.
Senator Flake.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for laying out the strategy. I think you know where this committee is and where I am in terms of wanting to give the President and the administration the authority and the wherewithal to move ahead and succeed in this mission and all our foreign policy missions. But I'm a little confused at the position that's being taken by the administration now that an AUMF is not required, would be desired but not required now. I look back at the one of the last hearings that you appeared in. It was with regard to Syria and chemical weapons. The President, as you know, had drawn a red line and said that he would act if they went beyond it. They went beyond it. And then the President came to Congress and said, "What do you want me to do?" I questioned whether or not that was a wise move. And you said to me, these are your words, "It's somewhat surprising to me that a member of Congress, particularly one on the Foreign Relations Committee, is going to question the President fulfilling the vision of the Founding Fathers when they wrote the Constitution, divided power in foreign policy, to have the President come over here and honor the original intent of the Founding Fathers in ways that do not do anything to distract from the mission itself." Now, I would argue, and I think others would as well, that that did distract from the mission itself. In fact, it torpedoed it. Coming to Congress when we said we were going to strike in what was described as a 10-day or 2-week mission to degrade the ability to use chemical weapons. But then, in this case, in what you yourself today describe as what will be a multi-year effort, say that you don't need, you desire, but don't need congressional buy-in. It's best when we speak with one voice. Our allies know that, and in order to build the kind of coalition that is going to be required to, one, defeat ISIL, and two, sustain that defeat over time, our coalition partners and our adversaries have to believe our threats and our promises. And I would submit that it helps for us to be together. So I question